Hi there, Lisa. Can we do a mic check?
Yes, can you hear me?
Sure can, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Lauren, you want to do a mic check?
Can you hear me?
Sure can, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Stephen, you want to do a mic check?
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Sure can, thank you.
Okay,
Councilmember
you're
Zimmerman?
welcome.
I can hear you. Not very well. Hang
I can
on
hear
just a
you.
second. I've got little.
You cannot hear me very well.
Hang on a second. It's on my end, not yours. There we go. Give me a mic test one more time.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfect. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks, Matt.
You bet.
Hi, Mayor, can we do a mic check?
Can you hear me?
Sure can, thank you.
You.
Hi there, Councilmember Chelsea. Can we do a mic check?
Hi, Caitlin. Can you hear me?
Sure can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there, Councilmember Thomas. Can we do a mic check?
Hello there.
I got you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Caitlin, this is Lindsay. Can you hear me?
Sure can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are at 6 o'clock. Are we ready to begin?
We are, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the December 7th, 2020 Council Committee meeting. I'm Mayor Michelle Disler and I'll be chairing this meeting. Besides myself, the committee members who are participating include Tammy Thomas, Ward 1, Matt Zimmerman, Ward 1, Eric Jenkins, Ward 2, Mike Kimling, Ward 2, Lisa Larson Bonnell, Ward 3, Kurt Knappen, Ward 3, Lindsay Constance, Ward 4, and Jill Chalfie, Ward 4. Before we begin, I'd like to go over some ground rules. I want to make sure that all remote participants keep their devices muted until I ask for comments. We will use the raise hand feature in Zoom so I can recognize you. Just like always, I'll ask for motions on each item if necessary. Please raise your hand and wait to be called on before speaking so we can get an accurate record of the minutes. Next, I'd like to go over some emergency procedures for the meeting. City Council and Council Committee meetings will continue to be held via Zoom. During the meeting, I'll offer the opportunity for public input. If you'd like to speak to the council at any of those times, please come forward to the designated microphone. I'll ask you to state your name and address for the record, and then you may offer your comments. So that members of the audience can hear your comments, I'd ask that you speak directly into the microphone. By policy, comments are limited to 5 minutes. No person may speak more than twice to any one agenda item. Only comments related to city business are permitted. Comments and remarks that are personal, impertinent, or slanderous are not permitted. Disruptive acts are not permitted. Face coverings are required when speaking into the microphone to help protect one another. After you're finished, please sign the form on the clipboard to ensure we have an accurate record of your name and address. Additionally, comments can be submitted to the entire governing body via email at governingbody@cityofshawnee.org. There are 2 items on tonight's agenda. Item number 1 is an update on the CARES Act Community Development Block Grant Coronavirus CDBG CV funded activity. On March 27, 2020, the CARES Act provided $168,955 in Community Development Block Grant Coronavirus CDBG CV funds to the city. The funds have been used for public service assistance for small business grant assistance. An additional $245,797 of CDBG CV has been awarded to the city. Neighborhood planner Lauren Grastoff will provide an update on the programs and services and is seeking direction on the use of the additional funds. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. I hope everyone's doing well. I am going to just give a brief overview of the Community Development Block Grant program specific to the coronavirus funds that were allocated as part of the CARES Act, and then also provide a review of the programs we've undertaken thus far. And then finally, I will end with discussion or any questions we have. We have a couple new proposals for new projects for use of those funds. Next slide, please. You can go to the next one. As you are aware, as we've discussed at several council committee and city council meetings at this point, the CARES Act, which was signed into law in March, did award $168,955 of coronavirus assistance funds through the HUD Community Development Block Grant Program. Those funds were awarded in addition to our annual allocation as an entitlement community, which just means that we have more than 50,000 residents. Next slide, please. The CDBG program essentially is intended to serve one of 3 populations. So that's to benefit low and moderate income persons, aid in the prevention or elimination of slums or blight. And also it can address needs of particular urgency. This typically has to do with like natural disaster assistance funding. The Community Development Block Grant coronavirus activities must meet the national objectives already established for the program, as well as be utilized to prepare for, be in prevention of, or respond to the coronavirus. Next slide. On July 13th, 2020, the City Council approved a substantial amendment to our 5-year plan and our annual action plan. And that was to incorporate the funds that were allocated in March into our planning projects for 2020. The city council did choose to do 100% match of the funds, that the federal award amount. $56,955 of the CDBG funds was allocated for public service assistance, and that includes rent mortgage assistance. It can generally also include things like healthcare, childcare assistance, general public services. Again, there was a match of those funds, of city funds, from the Economic Development Fund. And then the second program that was selected was $112,000 for small business assistance with the city match, and that was for rent or mortgage assistance. Next slide. The public service assistance, we had 3 applications for those funds and did award funding to each 3 of the entities you see on the screen, including Salvation Army, Shawnee Community Services, and Catholic Charities of Northeast Kansas. All elected to provide rent and mortgage and utility assistance. Most of these organizations actually already provide these types of programs, so they essentially were adding additional funding sources to specifically provide for families that have been impacted by, financially impacted by COVID. The total funding award for those applications were $17,500. That left $96,410 that has been set aside for future public assistance needs. And this can be any of those subrecipients that you currently see can request additional funding through those funds, or if there are other organizations that provide eligible assistance, public service, then we can consider those for future funding opportunities. None of these funds have actually been spent to date. What really that means is just the organizations have not submitted for reimbursement, but this does not mean that there is not a need and these organizations are not fulfilling their roles. It simply just means that part of this requirement, the coronavirus funds are actually federal natural disaster funds. One of the primary stipulations to these funds is that the benefit cannot be duplicated. So essentially it has to be kind of the last money awarded and going out. So any of the community organizations, United Way funds, any of those funds have to be spent prior to being able to spending these funds. So like I said, there are current programs, they're operating, and they're serving at the capacity that the organizations are able to. We just haven't reimbursed any of these yet. Next slide. The second program was the Small Business Assistance Program. We coined it the Shawnee Economic Recovery Assistance Program, or SARA for short. This awarded up to $5,000 in rent or mortgage assistance. The awarded amount was based on no more than 3 months of rent or mortgage payments. And these funds were paid directly to the landlord or mortgage holder on behalf of the business. The business had to be located in Shawnee with a brick and mortar location. So that meant no home-based businesses were eligible. Nonprofits and corporations were also not eligible for this program. The criteria also included that the business had to have 2 to 25 employees. That's full-time equivalent. So any part-time breakdown could go up to 25 full-time employees. Non-essential, this was targeted for non-essential businesses that either had to shut down or limit operations during the stay-at-home orders, as well as the following Kansas executive orders that lasted well through May of this year. And these were grant funds, so repayment is not required of these. Next slide. The applications were all taken in and criteria was laid out so that essentially there were 3 different program options, funding options, but it was up to city staff to determine which funding source or mechanism the business was eligible for. So there, through the CDBG program, there's micro enterprise assistance, and that's businesses which are owned by low to moderate income persons with 2 to 5 employees. The other option was low to moderate income job creation or retention, and that was for businesses with 6 to 25 full-time employees. And this essentially, the funding would allow either a low to moderate income position to be created or retained as a result of receiving those funds. And then the third option, which was you'll see here in a second, this was the widely used and easier eligibility criteria. City funds were used to assist businesses that met all other criteria aside from the federal requirements for the low to moderate income benefit. And as I said earlier, the eligibility was determined by staff based on our regulations or criteria established for the program, as well as federal requirements. Next slide. The applications, we began accepting those on August 3rd and accepted those through August 23rd. We had 31 applications received. We did receive them both electronically as well as hard copies to City Hall. 13 applications were declared to not be eligible. They were for various reasons. Some were essential businesses that did not have to cease or alter operations. A few didn't have, it was just a self-employed business with no employees, and just some basic criteria that was not met by applicants. We had a few that also did not show any economic loss. That minimum threshold loss was $2,000, and the documentation provided did not demonstrate that. But we did have 18 applications that were approved for 18 businesses. Just over $87,000 was awarded. And as I noted, all of those applications were awarded with using the city funds that were provided as the match for this. This was an equivalent of approximately 28 months of rent that was paid for, and 16 of the 18 awards were for the full $5,000 grant. As you'll recall, the funding award is based on what the monthly rent amount is, and it will pay up to $5,000. It took approximately 1 month to review all the applications. They were reviewed and accepted on a first come, first served basis. And so there was ongoing review of those. None of the businesses submitted complete application the first go around. So that demonstrates there was some back and forth that had to happen, and why this took a little bit longer in the review process than anticipated. But we did have all the awards issued, which included checks mailed out by the end of October. Next slide. So just a wrap up of this program. We still have the $112,000 of the CDBG CV money available, as well as just over $24,000 of the city match still remaining. This leaves assistance available for at least 27 more businesses, and that's based on that full $5,000 grant award amount. In response to this, I know that we have had I've received phone calls of questions about when we might be doing another round. I did want to point out that there's currently $13.5 million available through Johnson County government. and that's through December 30th for small business assistance. So because this funding is again some of the last to go out the door and available to use, we did want to make sure that other funding sources are getting utilized that are available, and then but depending on what the federal government does, if there's any other assistance programs available or not. Here coming up, we're looking at doing another round of the funds that are remaining in the first quarter of 2021, noting some minor modifications to be made just to hopefully simplify the program and increase usability. Just from creating this program really quickly, we used some best practices for this, but there was certainly some documentation that just as staff going through these that I didn't necessarily need after reviewing it. So there's certainly some things that can be changed or slightly modified to help enhance this and hopefully get more businesses eligible for these programs, specifically the federal funding programs, so that we can help those businesses, small businesses in need. Next slide. So if the part of tonight's discussion revolves around this coronavirus round 3 award. The first rounds of awards was the awards that we received that I've discussed tonight that went out to entitlement communities. The second round went to states and insular areas. And then round 3 was actually awarded on September 11th of this year. And this was at the discretion of HUD. In the third round, the city received another $245,797. And this just makes a cumulative award this far of CDBG coronavirus funds of over $400,000. Next slide. The round 3 proposal, I have not issued a call for grants at this point, but as Friends of JCDS is currently a subrecipient of ours in the 2020 and 2021 CDBG program, I do talk with them frequently throughout the year, and we did discuss some of their needs. And they have submitted 2 project proposals for use of the round 3 funds. If some of you may or may not be familiar with Friends of JCDS, but they provide affordable and accessible homes for individuals with intellectual or developmental disability. They have several homes here in Shawnee and throughout Johnson County that they provide reduced rent, and then clients receive additional services through their partnership with Johnson County Developmental Supports. Next slide. So there are 2 funding requests. The first one is for $2,850 for installation of air purifiers, air scrubbers on HVAC systems in 3 of their Shawnee homes. 2 of those homes have 4 residents and the third home has 3 residents, so a benefit of 11 persons for coronavirus prevention. And then the second larger grant request is for $16,000 to make accessibility improvements at a home they very recently purchased here in Shawnee that they will be rehabbing to meet the needs of their clients, and intend to use it actually January through May of 2021 for any clients who do contract the coronavirus and need to quarantine and wouldn't be exposing other household members in their current residence. After, hopefully, I'm confident we'll have a post-COVID point in time, but they do intend the home to then be incorporated into their affordable housing stock after that. These proposed projects do meet the national CDBG objectives and the city's strategic priority of providing public improvements. Since this is owned by a nonprofit organization, it is considered a public facility. So next slide. The next steps, I will certainly take any questions as well on any of the existing programs that I reviewed tonight. And the intent, part of the intent for tonight's discussion is to see if the council committee would like to move forward with consideration for approval of the two Friends of JCDS requests. And then if they would like to move forward, those do have to go to City Council for final approval. And we would likely be looking at taking those forward at the second council meeting in January. City staff is not recommending additional considerations for use of the round 3 coronavirus funds at this time. We do feel that current funding levels appear to meet current organizational capacities. While I think we all realize that there are gaps in systems and funding at this point, there's only so much capacity available to administer these funds. And there are a lot of other funds out there currently that organizations are trying to work through. And then also just the desire to remain versatile, as we know that the needs based on this pandemic continue to change and will likely change here coming up as the vaccine gets released. So we did want to wait. We have it's typically about 6 years to spend these funds. While there's no intent to spread that spending timeline out that long, we certainly do have some flexibility with the timing of these funds. So next slide is actually probably just the ending slide. If you want to go back, that's fine. That's the end of my presentation. And I'm again open for any questions. And I do want to note, I believe Janelle Bowers with Friends of JCDS is on the presentation tonight if you do have specific questions for them.
Thank you. I have Councilmember Larson Bonnell, and then Councilmember Constance, Councilmember Jenkins, and Councilmember Knappen. Councilmember Larson Bonnell, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Lauren, very much for your presentation, and thank you to the city staff for your work on reviewing the applications and getting the funds out. I do have several questions, so my apologies. Before I get to the questions, I do want to note that I am 100% in favor of moving forward with the funding request from JCDS. They do amazing work in our city, and I'm personally a big fan, but they are a needed community resource in the fact that these funds fall into the federal side. That's wonderful, and that's a great use of those funds. So my first question is, can you remind me the public assistance portion of this, was that limited to only rent, mortgage, and utility assistance? What about things like providing food to community members?
So it is not limited to just rent, mortgage, or utility. That's just how the organizations chose to use that funding. So it's a category of eligibility. It's considered emergency assistance. So food could potentially be included as a service that they allow or provide for.
Thank you. And on the Sarah side, a couple of questions, and I'll ask all three of them because they're somewhat related. Why did we choose to exclude corporations? And the reason that I'm asking that question is just because a business is structured as a corporation doesn't mean that it is really any different than any other business that is not legally structured as a corporation. So I wasn't sure I understood the reasoning behind that. Related to that, why did we choose to exclude nonprofits? And the final question is, why did the business have to have employees? Thank you.
Okay, so as far as the SARA grant goes, I actually did provide some flexibility. There were like S corps or certain types of corporations that we did allow, like if it's a sole owner corporation, the intent of that, which I did provide flexibility for, was that they weren't like national, corporately large businesses owned, not like we did allow like franchisees to submit for this funds. We just didn't want national programs to be utilized in this program. And then nonprofits, there's actually some additional restrictions for federal restrictions for allowing nonprofits to receive assistance. That it differs. So we would have had to structure the program a little differently, but that's certainly something we can look into with future rounds if that's something the council decides they would like to add or include into this program. And then the 2 to 25 employees, we did structure it that way partly because the federal allocations, the minimum is 2 employees. So that kind of, we had to kind of start from somewhere, and so we used the minimum federal requirements as the baseline. And then I think just the other thought was that typically, and this isn't, obviously doesn't apply to everyone, but if it's just a sole owner and they're the only employee, I think the thought was that they generally don't have a physical brick and mortar location. It's probably more like a home-based business situation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Constance, and then Councilmember Jenkins and Councilmember Nappen.
All right, thank you so much for the thorough presentation and all the research and fact gathering that went into this. I'm sure I also have a few questions, so I apologize. I'll try to be quick. First of all, yes, I'm in support of JCDS using those funds. It absolutely makes sense to fit within the program. I want to make sure that I understood, Lauren. Did you say we have 6 years to spend the $226,000? Is that correct?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So then I was thinking there was a regulation around spending or having it allocated by the end of this year. That must be incorrect.
There's not for these funds. There are the funds that Johnson County has as part of their CARES Act money,
Okay.
which is a different pot. They do expire at the end of this year, but not this money.
Got it. So we have $226K left over that can be spent, saved up for needs like this that arise in the next 6 years. That's accurate.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So I have a couple of questions just regarding more of the public service or the let's see, what do we call it? The public assistance. Have we connected it all with the Shawnee Mission School District, perhaps the SMEF Cares Fund, or those that provide McKinney-Vento services, the person in charge of nursing, Nurse Rebeck. I happen to just know, being in the schools, there are a lot of needs right now that families have, from utility assistance to just groceries to make it. So I just know from my day job that there's a lot of need. So is there a way that we can help provide that assistance and in a somewhat streamlined way to support students in the Shawnee Mission School District in some of our more challenging areas?
We certainly can pursue any of those opportunities or fulfill those challenges with the third round of CDBG CV funding. Obviously, there's eligibility criteria and requirements that have to be met, but we can certainly look into how we can match these funds with their needs, definitely.
Mm-hmm. So would that be a situation in which someone from the school district would apply for it? And that might be a next potential step?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so I guess I'd like to put that out as a suggestion. I know there's a lot of need for many of our families. So if we have some funding and we can help, it feels like a great fit. So I'd love to see us look into that. And those to me seem like some good channels that would be all ready to set up. I mean, the schools already know which families are struggling. So we'd hopefully be able to get in and help. And then the last question I had for you, can this funding be used, another need, I mentioned the utility assistance, folks in lower to moderate income housing, I'm concerned about them throughout the winter. How about using some of these funds to help individuals with maybe some energy efficiency improvements and things? It would have a positive impact on their air quality, reduce their energy bills. Is that something that would make use of the funds? I apologize for my dog. Does that fit within this? And if so, might that be a direction we could look at using these funds for?
So those types of improvements can actually be or are eligible improvements in our minor home rehabilitation program that we do through our regular community development block grant program. So those are eligible improvements. It does, the household has to be single family or no more than 4 unit complexes, and they can be, it's home owned, or excuse me, not rental unit, and they can be used for that. This funding could only be used for that if it specifically related to the coronavirus. So like if they were doing improvements, for instance, like Friends of JCDS and adding air scrubbers, some sort of decontamination units as part of that, then this funding could be used for that.
No, thank you for that. Just thinking about the air quality portion made me think about those needs. But so I would like to just encourage us to reach out to Shawnee Mission and see how we might partner with these funds. And just again, thank you for all your work on this.
Councilmember Jenkins, and then Councilmember Nappen, and then Councilmember Chafee.
Yeah, first couple questions. Thanks for the efforts there, Lauren. Appreciate it. My questions are why we had these limitations on the funds to small businesses where it could only go for mortgage or mortgage assistance or rent, because I talked to so many small businesses that just really didn't help them. They struggled to pay their rent or mortgages, and then they were just short of funds, and they kind of ate the losses and everything like that when they really could use some reimbursement for their bottom line, which was very much in the red. And this just didn't allow any flexibility for that at all. And I don't know why we couldn't do that unless it was a CDBG requirement, something that HUD has, where you couldn't use it for things like, well, what if they went in and spent money to modify their business to put up like the shields and so on, and for the spacing requirements, they had to meet those and perhaps had to spend money to do that, and just a lot of different costs. And this just seemed like a pretty darn narrow focus, and I think we kind of let our folks down with that. I don't know if we can explore that and find more ways to make things eligible that we have now. The other question I had was, why did we spend the city's portion of the match first? Because we could maybe, I was thinking before we even sat down and started talking about this that, well, maybe we could pull our match back out and say we're going to make a lot less restrictions on our piece, and kind of go in the direction which I was just going toward, of where it'd be much more flexible, because we could be as flexible as we want with our money. We're only reporting to ourselves. So the fact that we've already spent ours, darn, that kind of puts me in a pickle there. We can't really do what I was thinking about we could do. So maybe comment on that, maybe you can't. The other item was I would support the JCDS projects. That's fine. I think that'd be very helpful to some people, and it seems quite appropriate with the CDBG funding. But if you could address those other two issues, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. So the first question about why just rent, we did structure that way because it's really for efficiency purposes. We don't have to track then later on to make sure that payroll was paid accordingly, or some other expenditure. It's just a one-time funding, and the other portion of that is just that if we are providing for some form of assistance, financial assistance, that then the hope was that would offset, so then they could pay for PPE or payroll in lieu of having to pay some of the rent funds. So there are
right, but But I think you can see where that wouldn't work because we're talking about back payments on mortgages and rent. And if they're covering those, they wouldn't be able to just shift funds around like you're talking about. That wouldn't be feasible really because money already spent. I think we kind of let our folks down with that. I'm kind of disappointed, but that's okay. Go ahead and finish up.
Yeah, so it was technically intended to pay for rent for the months of March through May, but it wasn't actually back payments. So we allowed the payment, the funding, however the business needed it, if they needed it for future use or if they needed it for current use, they could use that rent assistance for however they needed it, just had to be paid for the rent assistance. And then the city match first, there was in the July approval of this program, it was confirmed that we were doing 3 different opportunities, and if the federal program requirements could not be met, then the city funds would be used to support this program. If there were other criteria that the city would like to change or create for a second round for just the city funds, that's certainly an option. We can do that, but the city fund was used first because we had opened this program and no one had met the federal requirements. So we wanted to make sure that we were fulfilling the program that we had as advertised, essentially, or as approved.
Yeah, that's a good answer for that. Appreciate it.
Okay, Councilmember Napa and then Councilmember Chalfie.
Yeah, my questions and comments actually mirror Eric's. So I'm good with approving the JCDS as well. I was going to ask the same thing on why we used the $87,000 out of the city matching funds first, and I had the same thought that we might be able to reduce the requirements if we had that money. But I heard your answer. I guess the one question I have: are you saying that all 16 of those that did receive money, none of them met the higher requirements for the federal funds?
That is correct. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And then I definitely would like to have lowered the requirements, but I guess that doesn't matter. So my other question is, in round 2, can the same business apply again if they can prove that they continue to be impacted?
I don't have a timeline or the new modified criteria established at this point, but that's certainly something that we can look into. I definitely think even if there's an ongoing need, that's certainly something that we would want this program to serve, but that's something that we can discuss.
Okay, good. Yeah. So to Mr. Jenkins' comment, we're getting $112,000 twice from the federal government, but out of the 30-some businesses that applied, apparently none of them meet the requirements. Getting money like that is not very useful. I am glad that we put in the city match. Perhaps we need to think about doing that again and with maybe even lower requirements. But anyway, thank you for your presentation. I appreciate it. And I'm done.
Councilmember Chalfie.
Thank you. Thanks, Lauren. That was a great presentation. 2 quick questions. I wanted to just circle back to the public service providers, and can you just clarify, 17,500 was awarded, but none of it has actually been claimed, is what I'm understanding. And if I'm understanding that correctly, why is that? Did they apply for it, but then they were able to get that support elsewhere?
So none of it, the way this program works is it's all done through reimbursement. And that's it's not just for the coronavirus funds, it's for all CDBG programs. So typically, a lot of organizations will go through a whole year of funds or 6 months before they wait to request reimbursement. But what I've seen so far, one of kind of it's not necessarily a hiccup, but because this is federal disaster funding, basically all other funds available to the organization have to be spent first before these type of funds can be spent. So I think what we've heard, at least from organizations so far, is that there are enough other pots of money available to them that they haven't need basically to dip into these funds yet.
Okay.
These are kind of like the safety preserver funds that it's kind of we get to it when we've hit our final, our last needs.
So does that fall into the 6 years as well? Is that money that they can claim up to 6 years from now, or is there a different timeline on that?
So all HUD CDBG funds have a 6-year spending deadline. So the first round 1, as well as this round 3 funds, all have the 6-year spending deadline.
Okay, so the only money that, I'm just making sure I understand, the only money that has to be used by the end of the year is what is coming through Johnson County. None of the Shawnee allocated money that we are specifically talking about or dealing with has that December 30th deadline.
That is correct.
Okay. One more quick question. So in that 6-year period, all of those eligible expenses still have to stem from COVID related expenses or losses, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. And then I guess my last comment is that I too support the proposal by Johnson County Development Services. I think that would be a great use of some of that tier 3 or round 3 HUD funds. So thank you very much.
Councilmember Jenkins and then Councilmember Zimmerman.
Go ahead and go to Councilmember Zimmerman. I guess I just didn't put my hand down. I just did a few minutes ago.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Councilmember Zimmerman.
Yeah, I'll be very, very brief. First, Lauren, thank you for the presentation and the good research. There's been lots of good questions tonight. Really just want to weigh in and say, likewise, I support the JCDS allocations as noted. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and I've been told there's no one in the audience, and we do have another item on the agenda. Oh, sorry, Councilmember Thomas.
Yes, I wanted to support this as well. I did have a couple of statements. As Councilwoman Constance mentioned, the Shawnee Mission School District, I don't think we could overlook the DeSoto School District as well, because the largest portion of DeSoto School District is in Shawnee. So if we do go down that route, I would hope that we would include that school district also. And when we look at non-for-profits, I know from my own experience, we have families right here in Shawnee that are caring for children of other Shawnee families, and these children come to them with nothing. I'm thinking of a very small child right now that's about 8 weeks old, that is staying with a family here in Shawnee, and they're doing good just to care for an additional child in their home. And as we all know, there's expenses, there's diapers, there's formula. I mean, this baby didn't even come with any clothing. And so, I would hope that there is something that we could do with some of these funds that would help these families that are caring for other families' children. And not all children, of course, are in school. So there is a tremendous number of families that are negatively impacted, children that are negatively impacted, that do not fall on the radar of a school district. And so I hope we can broaden some of those considerations for nonprofits to apply for supports. But I do support this program. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Thomas. So at this time, I see no other hands up. I will accept a motion. Councilmember Constance.
Move to approve.
Second, Zimmerman.
A motion has been made and seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Item number 2 is to discuss the 2021 federal and state legislative programs. Assistant City Manager Caitlin Gard will present information about issues and priorities for the 2021 federal and state legislative programs. Welcome, Caitlin.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm here tonight to present the federal and state legislative programs. This is something we do on an annual basis in the upcoming federal and state legislative agendas for next year, the 2021 season. So with that being said, I think a number of you have been through this process already, but for those who have not, we really do a thorough review of our legislative programs at both the federal and the state level. We start with the last year's program, so the 2020 program that the City Council adopted, and then we go through an evaluation process. We look at the legislation that was passed last year, actually not even passed, just proposed even, and then we look at the current climate to see if there's anything pressing that needs to be added. We review other organizations' programs as well. A number of cities here in the metro usually do have core city comparisons. The county, obviously the League of Kansas Municipalities, and then also I'm a member of the Chamber's Government Affairs Committee, so we make sure that our legislative platforms are at least aligned to some degree. And then once we have a draft of that, we request input not only from the department heads, but from the governing body as well. That was sent out a number of weeks ago in preparation for this meeting. And with all the feedback we get from every single piece of input, we put together the 2021 program, and that's what's being presented tonight. Drafts of each programs are included in your packet. First, I will go over the federal legislative program. We are doing it a tiny bit differently this year. Usually we wait to start the federal legislative program until after the first of the year. We thought we would kill two birds with one stone and do it all in one kind of foul swoop here. So we will quickly go through the federal legislative program. There weren't a number of changes, but just to be transparent, we want to make sure that we cover that as well. As we all know, we have federal legislators in the U.S. Senate and the House of Representatives, Senator Jerry Moran, and then Senator-elect Roger Marshall, and then over in the House side, Sharice Davids. I'm not going to go over everything on this list, but I did want to point out that we, as Lauren just did a great job of explaining, get a number of dollars from the federal government relatively frequently. So here is just a summary of all of those funding opportunities that we've received from the federal government over the last few years. Everything like we talked about with CDBG, those more frequently discussed items like the Surface Transportation STP programs, or CDBG, as Lauren was just discussing, all the way down to some grants that we receive. For example, the grant that we received to fund some police officers that was spread over a 3-year period, and then some for SCBAs for our fire department. So I'm not going to go over all of those. They're included in your packet, but this is just some examples. With that being said, our federal program is made up of 3 sections. Our priority sections, so those that we want to make sure that are at the top of the list for our legislators to review. Any current issues that we think may come up this legislative session, and then any continuing issues that may not come up this legislative session, but we want to make sure is on everyone's radar. With that being said, like I said, a draft program was included in your packet memo. In a couple different updates, we did include very minor language updates to the introduction and the postal facility section. We also did update the taxable debt issues section. Our financial advisor just wanted to include additional language, making sure that government entities remain tax exempt. So we made that language quite a bit stronger. We did remove the internet sales tax and sales and use tax initiative from our federal legislative agenda. We were actually, and I'll talk about it in just a little bit, we were also going to propose to remove that from our state legislative agenda, but we don't think we're quite there yet. It has been kind of remedied on a federal level, but there are some things that staff would like to see from our legislators at the state level as far as our internet sales tax is concerned. I will move on to our state legislative program. As we all know, we just had a recent election and our representatives in our House districts. We do have one new representative, Joella Hoy in the 17th district. We do meet with all of these legislators on an annual basis, obviously on a more than annual basis, but for sure at least annually, to make sure that we go over these legislative programs and that we have kind of continuing conversations. And then Senator Mike Thompson on the Senate side. The state program is broken into a number of sections. This very closely mirrors the same sections that are in the League of Kansas Municipalities program. We did want to have that legislative priorities section just to make sure we have any item kind of that come to the top that we think are going to be really active in the legislative session here in 2021. And then we have a number of other sections as well. We did make a few changes this year to our state program. We did update some language in a few sections as well as have a few additions. The languages that were updated, that internet sales tax that I was just discussing, we were originally going to remove that from our program and kind of on second, third thought, after we had a conversation with a number of different organizations who were keeping that in their program. We just want to make sure that internet sales tax collections continue to occur. And if there is any legislation to be brought forth to make sure that that internet sales tax is still being disseminated to the cities, we want to make sure that Shawnee still continues to collect that tax. We did very minor update our mental health statutory pass-through funding, food tax, and our CAPERS language, just to make them a little bit more clear. When we went back and reread them, we just thought a few word changes was necessary. And then we did have 3 new additions this year. Right-of-way management came out of some legislation that was proposed last year. It seems kind of silly, but we would have figured that this would have been in our legislative program from the beginning. But we did want to call out and make sure that we indicated that the city is interested in having our own management of our right-of-way and that we could be able to manage any utilities or anything to that nature that goes in the right-of-way. We wanted to make sure that was in there. There was a bill proposed last year with cell service and within the right-of-way that would have maybe taken a different direction there. We are also proposing to add special district consolidation. We do believe this is going to come up with the legislature this year. We want to make sure that there's clear language on how special districts would be consolidated into the cities that they're within. We have 2 here in Shawnee. The watershed district here down off of Neiman, and then obviously the levying district up in the northwest portion of the city. So if anything is going to be legislatively deemed to be consolidated within the city, we want to make sure that there's legislation telling us exactly how to do that and what that looks like moving forward. And then finally, we did add a very small section on municipal court. We wanted to make sure that if anything is going to continue to occur as far as the Zoom remote meetings occur, we want to make sure that that's covered in our municipal court as well. It's been going very well for us, but we just want to see if there is any language proposed, which we've been told there may be, we want to make sure that we were covered there. Last year, Councilmember Jenkins did request that we better indicate maybe how specific items directly impact Shawnee. We tried to do that this year by identifying the legislation that was either passed or failed, brought up last year in 2020, under the specific items that it would have related to. And we wanted to just make sure that we indicated how that would directly impact Shawnee. So you'll see in your draft program that we've done that. So hopefully that meets the requirements. So the next steps here, we are recommending this is fast-tracked to the December 14th City Council meeting. This is so we can have a formal program that's adopted by the governing body to provide to the legislators before the state session begins on January 11th. And as the session begins and gets underway, we will make sure any updates are provided to the city manager and the governing body as needed. With that, I will take any questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Larson Bonnell.
Thank you. I have 2 somewhat minor changes. The first is on the food tax. These are both on the state legislative agenda. The food tax, that was only added last year. I know I'm specifically remembering Councilmember Jenkins and me really wanted this on there. It was revised this year to add the words for low-income citizens. While I support conceptually what I think that the city is trying to do there, I would prefer that that additional language be removed. The reason is that in order for something like a bifurcated system to work where low-income citizens are not taxed on food, you can kind of approach that in two different ways. You can either say, let's identify low-income citizens and they can do something like present a card when they go to the grocery store and then they won't be taxed. Or you can say on the flip side, when they are filing income taxes, they can either get a tax credit or they can get some other kind of beneficial tax statement. Both of those are fairly significant barriers for people to meet. It also often requires that you be a Kansas resident, a full-time resident. So I think that while I understand the intent of this, I actually think that adding that language complicates this a lot more than it should be complicated, and I'm not in favor of adding that language. The second thing is on the medical marijuana provisions. This is not intended to be a policy statement of mine in any way, shape, or form, but I think that we should broaden that to say medical or recreational marijuana. What's happening on a national level is that this is being looked at not just for medical, but also for recreational. And I just want to make sure that our message of being thoughtful about how such legislation is rolled out applies equally to both medical and to recreational marijuana. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further, oh wait, there are two recommended actions to consider. First recommended actions consider fast tracking the 2021 federal legislative program to the December 14th, 2020 City Council meeting with a recommendation to adopt. I'll accept a motion. Oh, sorry, Councilmember Jenkins. Councilmember Jenkins.
Yeah, we moved forward before I was ready to move forward. I was going to talk about
I'm sorry.
an item there.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, but I guess I did do it before you moved, but I guess you didn't see it because it was just right close to when you moved forward. I just have some issues with some of the items, and I don't have issues with some of the other items. And so if I move this forward tonight, it's for the purpose of sending it to the council. But I may have some additional comments then, where there's to discuss some of the concerns I have. I know we're late in the game tonight, and we don't have a lot of time. So it's kind of hard to really get into some lengthy discussion and debate on what should or should not be in here at this point. But I just wanted to go on record as saying I do have some concerns with some of the items that's in our legislative agenda. So moving forward, I'd just like that to be, like I say, just on the record, because I'm going to probably raise some issues at the council meeting. Otherwise, I could say we can, I'm not really that crazy about fast tracking it either, because I'm still going over some of these items here and trying to really gel my position on where I stand on them, and I would really like to have a couple more weeks on it, to tell you the truth. So I'd be most happy to see it delayed a little bit longer.
Thank you, Councilmember Chowfie.
I just wanted to clarify procedurally, there's not really a way that we can sort of work through some of those things or hear Councilmember Jenkins' suggestions ahead of it coming to us in a council meeting if in fact we do fast track it, correct? That this would be the only way to do that. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, the intent would be to review those tonight.
So it's been brought to my attention, the Planning Commission meeting was canceled tonight, so we do have time for further discussion tonight that we normally would not have if we want to open that up and have it tonight.
I have someplace I have to be, Mayor,
Okay.
because I assumed the meeting was going to be over before the Planning Commission would meet. So I went ahead and acknowledged an obligation.
Okay. So then the first recommended action is to consider fast tracking the 2021 federal legislative program to the December 14th, 2020 City Council meeting with a recommendation to adopt. Councilmember Nappen?
Yeah, I was just going to chime in. I'm fine with moving it forward, but if Mr. Jenkins is requesting from us more time, I'm happy to honor that as well. I don't think it's do or die.
Councilmember Zimmerman and then Councilmember Kimling. Councilmember Zimmerman put his hand down. Councilmember Constance and then Councilmember Kimling.
Sure. I guess before we determine whether to change the date, fast track or not fast tracked, could we get some information from staff about the reason for this particular timeline? Just so that we understand what we're choosing.
Sure.
Thank you.
So the draft programs were sent to the governing body almost as they are in your packet tonight. I want to say at least 3 weeks ago, potentially 4, for the review and hope for a discussion tonight. The intent would be to fast track the items so we have a formal program to move forward to our legislators before the session begins in January. With that being said, there is I believe, I'm not looking at a calendar, there will be a January meeting the first week of January, so we could potentially do it then as well.
Caitlin, would that first meeting be a council meeting or a committee meeting though? The one that's before the session starts?
Sorry, I'm just looking at a calendar here. So it does look, you're right, Councilmember Constance. The committee meeting will be on the 4th. The council meeting will be on the 11th of January.
Okay, so essentially, if we're not able to pass this on December 14th, our legislators would not have it by the time session starts. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Kimling.
Yeah, I'd also be in favor with Eric there, giving this some more time to think about. I don't think it necessarily has to be to our legislators on day one. And so I would be in favor with some more time like he was requesting.
Thank you. Councilmember Thomas.
Yes, I just think as a newer council member, rounding out the first year, and this is the first time I've seen this process, not necessarily the information, but the process. I would appreciate having the opportunity for more discussion and just thoroughly digest it. I don't think this will hinder our legislators at all by not having it on day one.
Councilmember Zimmerman and then Councilmember Jenkins.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm fine with extending this. I would hope we could put tonight decide on a new deadline for purposes so that staff can plan accordingly. If the request is to extend it, we should designate a deadline ourselves.
Okay.
And I'll be good with whatever that is.
Okay, Councilmember Jenkins and then Councilmember Constance.
Yes, first I'd like to point out the good news. The good news is we're deliberating on this instead of just firing it forward. I think that's a good thing that we want to take this seriously because I think it is a serious thing to discuss what we want to do and what we want to tell our legislators that we'd like to do at the state and federal level. So I think that's okay that we want to take a little bit more time to have a discussion of that. I think it would be adequate if we meet again on the 4th to talk about these matters and come forward with some meaty substance and make it first on the agenda so we have time to actually give them some good discussion. And then I think we'd be ready to go ahead and move forward on the 11th. And I'm not really concerned whether the legislature has our legislative agenda on the 11th. They're not going to do squat that day anyway. They're just going to be getting themselves together and kind of getting organized and that sort of thing. So it's not critical that they have this on the 11th of January. I mean, that's a nice target date. But other than that, it's not really critical. So I'd like to, instead of moving forward for the December 14th city council meeting, I'd like to just go ahead and make a motion that we table this till the to the January 4th meeting of the council committee meeting, and with subsequent review on the January 11th council meeting.
Okay.
Second.
And that is a motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Second recommended action is to consider fast tracking the 2021 state legislative program to the December 14th, 2020 city council meeting with a recommendation to adopt. Councilmember Zimmerman, oh nope, sorry, Councilmember Larson Bonnell. Hands are going up and down here. Sorry, guys. Councilmember Larson Bonnell.
I was going to move to delay further discussion until the January 4th council committee meeting and have this on the January 11th city council meeting, just like we did with the other agenda.
Second.
Okay, a motion has been made and seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion passes. That concludes our agenda. I'll accept a motion to adjourn. Councilmember Constance.
Move to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion passes. Thank you. We are adjourned.